and dedicates that money to two separate funds. One's managed through the Colorado Housing Finance Authority, and the other one managed through the State Division of Housing, which is under the Department of Local Affairs. And so we've got, again, folks from both of those two organizations that are going to help walk us through what that looks like, how those funds can be accessed. But before we get started, I want to first of all just thank our sponsors. Kaiser Permanente is our lead sponsor, and then we have Brownstein Hyatt & Farber, the law firm that operates here in town, and Credit Union, New Colony Apartments, Northern Engineering, Somerset Apartments, and UC Health. So again, thanks to those sponsors who helped make this possible. And so without further ado, I'm going to introduce our two speakers, Kristen Toombs, who is the Director of Homeless Initiatives with the Colorado Division of Housing, and Steve Boyce, who is with the Colorado Housing Finance Authority and Business Lending. And before I kick it over to them, I just want to, first of all, again, thank all of you for joining in. And we do want to make this somewhat conversational. So as we go through, if you have questions or you need a clarification, if you would please use the raise hand feature. And for those of you who aren't already experts in Zoom, down at the bottom of your screen, the reactions, if you click that, you'll see raise hand function. So if you would raise your hand, and that way you jump up to the top of my screen so I can recognize you. And then after you ask your question, if you would go ahead and remute yourself and then lower your hand, and we'll move on. But again, at any time, if you have questions, please feel free to raise your hand, ask a question. Let's make sure you all hear the information that we've got for you today. So with that, I'm going to just start off, and Kristen, she is a volunteer for us today, stepping in for Andrew Paredes, who had a family emergency. But Kristen, again, I thank you for stepping in last minute. And just to show my appreciation, I'm going to start off with you, because what I think what we really need to hear first is, what does it take for a community to make themselves ready for Prop 123 funds? So with that, Kristen, I'm going to open it up and let you manipulate your screen. Assume you have some presentation. So I've shared screen, so feel free to take it away.
Wonderful. Thank you, Joe. Yes, and apologies, I'm in one of my son's rooms right now, so you can enjoy the Legos and whatever else is behind me. Summer with kids home, I just have found some creative space that was hopefully a little quiet to be with you all. So bear with me with that. But yes, I'm Kristen Toombs, Director of our Office of Homeless Initiatives at the Division of Housing within the state's Department of Local Affairs. So glad to be with you. There's definitely a team of us at Division of Housing working on this important Proposition 123, and we each have a kind of a piece of the pie. So if I am not able to answer something that is burning for you that you want answered, or we want to dig in further one-on-one, by all means, I am more than happy to help connect with you offline or circle back with some of my colleagues to get you the further details and information that you need. So thank you so much for wanting to talk about this. We're really excited. And I am just, bear with me, I'm going to share my screen. Oh, it says I can't share my screen. I don't know if that's possible. And Joe, I did send you the link as well, but I don't know if that's possible. I just sent it to you, so apologies for that. So I don't know, it might be easier that way too. So just give us a minute.
Yep, we should have you ready to share.
Beautiful. Oh.
It's still not allowing.
Oh, now it is.
Okay,
wonderful.
Great. Thank you. Sorry about that.
No, thank you. Thanks for rolling with me, everybody. All right, hopefully you can see this.
Yes, we
Awesome.
can.
See if I move to slideshow. I don't want to miss you all. Beautiful, and this will make it a little bigger. All right, I'm going to dig right in. So just high level, want to make sure, I know Joe just gave a high level about Prop 123, but just want to make sure everybody is on the same page about the nuances of the funds, what goes where, how this is going to come to the state. So You can see here, Division of Housing will receive 40% of the funds, and our colleagues at the Office of Economic Development International Trade, or OEDIT, will receive 60% of the funds. You can see here, year one is about half of what we anticipate moving forward in a typical fiscal year, because this did not start till January, because it was on the ballot in November. So just to give folks context, this first year, still a heck of a lot of money, 151 million. But this lets you see the typical estimates that we are anticipating for this current fiscal year starting July 1, the one starting July 1, and then moving forward. So that's part of it. So in the programs, we will have home ownership, programs around homelessness and local capacity building. OEDIT will be working with CHAFA, Colorado Housing Finance Authority, and their programs will be land banking, housing equity, and concessionary debt. So we'll go into those, but that's just, it's important to know how they're broken up. These are all exciting programs, but just keeping track of who's doing what, so you know who to go to. So based on statute, for the 40% of funds that Division of Housing will receive, we're going to have up to 50% towards home ownership, 45% towards homelessness, and 5% towards local planning capacity. So you can see the estimates there. We're estimating for home ownership, a little over 30 million in the first year, 62 million in the second year, 27 million for homelessness in the first year, up to nearly 56 million in the second year, 3 million for capacity building, up to 6 million in the second year. And then again, that second year will be the estimated ongoing rate we anticipate. Oops, let me just move forward. Okay, so for the home ownership program, and Joe, just want to check in. I know you were asking, folks are eager to know how to access this. Is it helpful for me to give overview of the programs themselves, or do you feel like folks have this?
No, absolutely. So please, yeah,
Great.
give the overview and then move into how they get at it.
Perfect. Okay, thank you for that. Okay, so for the down payment assistance, this will be for first-time home buyers, and your income can be, for those eligible households, will be 120% area median income. These will be grants and loans. You can see who they can, the grants and loans can go to local nonprofits, governments, tribal governments, community development, oops, apologies. Land trusts that support affordable home ownership. And we also can assist with mobile home buyers as well. So how you can access this, and again, I'm just going really high level for each of these, but we can pause for questions. So in year one, again, we're estimating 30 million that can go towards home ownership. So you will see here, we are looking at for new construction, acquisition, rehab. Those will be the monthly applications. If folks are familiar with partnering with Division of Housing, seeking funding from us for development for affordable housing currently or historically, think of that application process. You're familiar with it. We have a process internally for it. These will go through that, and we will have more details for you soon on what are some of the parameters we're looking for. But you will be able to come in on a monthly basis, just like we do now. Same with the mobile home park acquisition. For owner repair or down payment assistance, we are going to do specific applications for those. So stay tuned for those. As you can see, here are some estimated times that we have for those. So once those solicitations are finalized, we'll be doing more informational sessions to really dig into the weeds of what those applications will have. As of now, stay tuned for and make note of these dates so that you can stay in the loop for when more of that information comes. All right, that was home ownership in a nutshell. Now I'm going to do homelessness high level. So in the, again, in the statute, it specifically says that we can have programs for persons experiencing or at risk of homelessness, and we can assist with rental assistance, eviction defense assistance, including legal financial case management. We also can provide grants and loans to nonprofits, local governments, tribal governments, also private entities for the development and or preservation of supportive housing. Supportive housing is a combination of subsidized affordable housing. So think of rental assistance vouchers along with supportive services directly coordinated with that program. Then the statute also says other homelessness related activities as determined by Division of Housing. So this can, and it specifically calls out housing programs paid for by a paid for success basis. So we are working on defining what that means. So everybody is clear, is that a social impact bond process or is it a performance-based agreement? We're working on those nuances. Other homelessness related activities, if anybody has worked with us at the Office of Homeless Initiatives or Division of Housing, you know that we've been increasingly defining that continuum of homelessness response. We have some program descriptions around that. We have our playbook around best practice. So we will utilize that existing information around strategy and best practices to help inform how we determine what other homelessness related activities are eligible for this.
Chris, if I may just interrupt real quick.
Absolutely.
So relative to that, this can be used for shelter because sometimes those can be the hardest funds to find, right? So this can be used for acquiring, designing, developing shelter. It doesn't have to be permanent housing, correct?
I appreciate you flagging that, Joe. So this is where the statute, the language specifically talks about, calls out supportive housing and the rental assistance and eviction defense assistance. So those are called out, which signals that the intent is those are the priorities for Prop 123 to fund those activities. That last bullet there, other homelessness related activities as determined by Division of Housing, is where shelter will fall. And so think of street outreach, think of, those are probably main ones that you don't see on here. Bridge housing, transitional housing, some of those are not on here, specifically called out. So what we are working on, and happy to have discussions with anybody as well, is, and when we do our summer outreach sessions, this is gonna be one of the things we're gonna dig into with folks. So look forward to hearing input there, is how we create some further guidance around how we will look at funding those other activities that are not specifically called out. So we'll get you some parameters around that. If giving you a sense for it, we do have again, parameters around how we think about funding shelter, transitional housing, bridge housing, street outreach. We have ways that parameters around that and how we think about funding that we will likely, that'll be the starting point. So stay tuned for that.
And just as a quick follow-up, so you are still taking input on, refinements to the program. So maybe if you could put in the chat when you're done, just a link for how people can sign up to be alerted for those community input opportunities.
Absolutely. Yes. So I'll put in my information. Folks can talk to me when it comes to the homelessness specifically. So I'll put in my email, and then also we will be having our annual summer outreach sessions where we go and visit several locations. So we'll make sure that you have that information as well. We do that in conjunction with CHAFA and Housing Colorado, and OEDIT will be joining us as well. So yes.
Great. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. We also, one thing for folks to note is that we have been awarding out our American Rescue Plan Act, SLFRF, or Treasury funds, and much of those funds are going towards shelter right now as well. So I think as communities, if helpful, as you're thinking through how do we think about how Prop 123 fits into our community and homelessness response, more than happy to have a conversation about what has been awarded thus far around homelessness, with that unprecedented money as well for ARPA, so that you can have a holistic picture of what resources are coming and what are still needed. So happy to do that as well. And while we're paused, I see there might be a chat. Oh, wonderful. Okay, Steve put something in there. Okay.
Yeah. So I'm gonna. For just real quick. So for those of you who didn't see it, there's a chat where Steve, who will be up next, put a link to the OEDIT funds that CHAFA is administering. So thanks for that, Steve.
So, close that door with noisy dogs. Okay, so speaking of this, this also relates to what you were just talking about, Joe, the question of what can folks apply for? What are the activities? So we've started to spell out some of that. Again, you will notice here, this is based on specifically what you see here is what we feel falls in line mostly with what was clear to us as priorities, either by the way the bill has been written or by, again, clear, obvious ones where we have been seeing that there is a need for it. You will notice on here, shelter is not on here right now. That's partially because, again, there is a lot of shelter being funded through the American Rescue Plan Act at this time. So we haven't finalized or codified that yet. But you can see here, if you just look 1 through 7, just note the different activities. If we find that that's what folks have been asking, how do I apply for this project or that project or this type of program model? So you can see here the development side of supportive housing. So if you need some gap funding, some capital to help you build supportive housing, you'll go through that monthly application just like you would for the home ownership or affordable rental, any of that are on the Office of Housing Finance and Sustainability. We have that monthly process. You'll do that. Now for folks who have done supportive housing, you're familiar with this process, but just to make sure everybody's on the same page, what we also ask if you are doing supportive housing is that you also complete our annual, what we call our annual PSH RFA, Permanent Supportive Housing Request for Applications. It's technically actually called the Annual Request for Applications for the Creation of Supportive Housing. We just call it the PSH RFA for short. What we do there is ask you to complete that, and that's where you can get project-based vouchers and some services for dollars as well. And that will be released soon. It has several due dates that we coincide with CHAFA's tax credit rounds as well as have some extra opportunities, due dates when you are not seeking tax credits. So we are more than happy to talk through that with you. If you are thinking about permanent supportive housing, you are thinking about development funds, vouchers, services, I highly recommend that you reach out to my team. Zach Schaffner is our point on that. I can put his email in here as well, and he can talk through that order of operations. Basically, it is the existing process already for any of these resources for supportive housing. Again, let's take advantage of the efficiencies of existing processes. That is our thinking there. Now, for outreach and rapid rehousing, those are eligible activities that already exist in our Emergency Solutions Grant Notice of Funding Availability. ESG is a HUD-funded program that there are some local communities that receive that as well. We at the state receive about $2 billion from the federal government for the ESG program to cover the entire state. That's not a lot of money. In recent years, we received an influx for the CARES Act to help with COVID response. We've also put some state funds towards this, some CDBG funds towards this program, because again, acknowledging that $2 million is not enough for the full continuum of homelessness response that the ESG program does. Again, because that is an annual NOFA that is existing and many partners and communities are aware of that process. And we will already be awarding similar activities through that process. We are going to insert Prop 123 funds in this first year through that. It says fall on here because timing is partially contingent upon when we receive our funding award from HUD. We have done it as early as mid-August some years and as late as mid-October. We always want to get it out as soon as possible because we know folks are utilizing these funds to help people experiencing homelessness, and that starts to creep into winter pretty quickly. And so we want you to be aware of those funds and what you'll be awarded. So stay tuned for that. We will absolutely make sure folks know about that. For the development of bridge housing, and Joe, this would go into shelter as well, as you were just asking about. That would be the monthly application, similar to supportive housing, homeownership. Again, if you need to build anything, if you're looking for money for that construction, development, rehab side of things, that'll be that monthly application. Now for the rental assistance, eviction, diversion, prevention, that is specifically called out in Prop 123, we are looking at doing a special application process for that because the ESG prevention is not as robust as what is specifically called out here. And we know we've had the ERAP program, right, in existence. And we've had some lessons learned and some great practices and capacity built through that. So we will be doing a special application process for that. I'm going to pause there. Any questions on that yet?
I am not seeing any questions yet. So your material you must be impeccable in presenting your material.
Oh, you know, it's all so easy and so clear, right? It's more of a stay tuned for more info. So now this is an important, there is a section, I'm sure folks are aware that in order to access Prop 123 funds, the local government must opt in to increasing the % of affordable housing over a 3-year period in your community. Now, there's a lot of conversation around what is the base, how do you determine the base, what if we don't make that percentage, et cetera. Mo Miskell and Connor Eberson on our team have been talking with local governments, communities about those details and are absolutely the best ones to talk with you about if you have questions or concerns. How do we know? How do we count our affordable housing? We've done some data to help you with that. If you have questions, concerns, anything, absolutely, I'll put their emails in here too, and they would be great to talk to one-on-one. One of the things that has come out from the original, that has changed from originally when Prop 123 happened till now, that is really important to highlight, says the person who works in homelessness world all day long, is that the homelessness programs are excluded from needing to opt into that. What does that mean? That means if your county or your city has said, well, for whatever reason, we're not feeling like we can say yes to opting into that 9% increase in affordable housing in our area. If you do that, you won't be eligible for the other Prop 123 funds, but your community still can have applications come to us on the homelessness side. Now, the key there is that you will not be able to be, the government cannot be the one to put forth that application. So yes, Joe, like that face. So if the government, I'm gonna say County A says, yep, we're not feeling like we can, for whatever reason, commit to that opting in for the increase in affordable housing, that's county itself, that local government county entity cannot be the one to then apply to OHI to say, hey, we want shelter money. It will need to be the non-government, nonprofit entity that does that. Okay. Again, if you have questions about that, come to me. And we just want to check in, make sure we've got the right applicant coming forward, all of that good stuff. Okay. Anybody have questions about that?
No, but I don't see any questions yet. I haven't seen anything pop up. But just to clarify, what are the requirements that the city must do? We know about the increasing the affordable inventory, but are there additional requirements? And maybe that's your next slide. I don't know.
It is not, but let me go through these quick and see. And if I don't have slides in here that answer that for us, Joe, we can make sure we cover that. This just really quickly, because I know we are coming up short on time. I want to make sure Steve can present on the important information you need to hear from him as well. So this is about again, we're going to have about 6 million for local capacity building. This will be through our partners, Division of Local Government, in partnership with Division of Housing. So we're 2 of the divisions at Department of Local Affairs. So you can see here that this will help with local planning departments to be able to increase capacity for processing land use, permitting, zoning, et cetera. Just to help, sometimes we know that limited capacity can make it a challenge if you are suddenly having more projects coming your way, because you've committed to increasing the stock of affordable housing. And so this is a way to help you with that capacity so that you can handle that increase. Or if you're in general needing that increase again. But again, this will be one of those ones that you can't apply for if you haven't opted in. And again, think of that rationale, right? You've said, yes, we'll create more. Oh, how are we going to process more? Again, being in state government, I appreciate there's all that behind the scenes that local government will need to do in order to move these forward. Okay, so here, what is that going to look like? So right now, we are working on that local planning capacity around the program design and the guidelines. And we will have guidance around that and do a pilot round in November. So you can see that here and some examples of the eligible project types here. So stay tuned for more of that, and our partners at DLG can dig into this if you have questions about it, or you have thoughts around where you might be feeling bottlenecks or pain points around capacity and want to see if it's eligible. So stay tuned for that. This tells you, and I'm going to fly through this a little fast so I can make sure we get to some of the questions about what does it mean to commit. So this just lets you know there are a lot of different income levels for eligible households depending on the project. And so we will share out these slides so you have this cheat sheet. But one thing to note is that the income limits for beneficiaries, I just want to highlight on the Division of Housing side, is on the higher end than we've historically had for some of our projects. So want to call that out, that it's 100% AMI and 120 AMI. So, and again, this is on the home ownership side. So, and I had shared this before on that. Now, there are not income limits for the programs around assisting people experiencing homelessness, which again is pretty standard for homelessness response programs and funding. Okay, so deadlines to commit is by November 1st. Oh, we've got Connor here. Connor, do you want to jump in here?
Yeah, sure thing. Thanks, Kristen. And thanks for grabbing the beginning of this. I had some technical issues there. So I'm Connor Everson, and I manage the policy and data analytics programs at the Division of Housing here at the state. And Kristen is absolutely right that the commitment is required by the localities to unlock the use of these new funds within those localities, whether it is by the local government itself or entities operating within them. So that means the first 3-year cycle here will have the deadline on November 1st to unlock that money for the entire period. But it's also possible to commit to a 2-year period or a 1-year period. And you just have to wait 1 year to do each of those. But we see a lot of folks are interested in committing this year or as soon as possible. And we've already seen a few filings, which is very exciting. And could we advance the slide, please? Thank you. So as far as the commitment goes, there's a few data sources that we had on the previous slide that are required by statute, whether it's the American Community Survey from the Census Bureau or the HUD retabulations of that data from the Comprehensive Housing Affordability Strategy. And it's it also has a few flexibilities in statute as far as how can this baseline amount of affordable housing be determined. One of the biggest parts of that is the income of folks that are determined to be in affordable housing. And the easiest option is to use the area median income of your own county, but you can also use the AMI of a neighboring county or the state household median income. And I think we already have a question in the chat here about has anyone's commitment been accepted? The answer is yes. The first locality to commit was the city of Salida, and that has been accepted and reviewed. We have a few more submissions very recently, but we haven't had the chance to review those yet. And at the bottom, oh, no, that's perfect. Thank you for advancing that. We already covered the filing deadlines, and something to make a little extra clear for this group is what type of housing can we take credit for increasing that baseline? Well, it needs to meet the definitions of affordable housing within the statute. So that's rentals at and below 60% of the area median income, and ownership housing at and below 100%. And that can be either new construction or rehabilitation with a new deed restriction put in there. But some of these programs, you can't take credit for that housing. So, for example, like a rental assistance vouchers and things like that, because there isn't construction involved, that can't be a part of the baseline increase. And of course, once all of the commitments are filed and submitted, there is a completely new cycle in 2027. And that's when we measure whether the localities meet that level or not. And the last thing that I'll say, we're really trying to reiterate is that when a locality commits to increasing their affordable housing, there's almost no repercussions at all. The only thing that happens is that that locality becomes ineligible for funding from the State Affordable Housing Fund for just 1 year thereafter. You can still receive all other funding from the state. You don't have to repay any grant or loan funds. So we're really trying to keep this simple and highlight the positives like that. And that's all that I've got. And I'll throw my email in the chat here for folks that have questions offline.
Great. Thanks, Connor. And thanks, Kristen. Just in a matter of time, what we'll do is we'll move over to Steve and he can share what CHAFA is working on. And then again, as always, as you have questions, please fire them away or put them in the chat and we'll get to them. Thanks. Steve.
Great. Thank you, everyone. And so I'm going to share my screen here. Hopefully this is going to work. And hopefully you guys are seeing my screen here.
Yes, sir.
Okay, let me get this going here. Okay, so I think we've gone over the numbers here. So through Proposition 123 in CHAFA's bucket of the Affordable Housing Financing Fund, so we're expecting about $186 million, and that would be kind of on a full year cycle. So for the numbers that you'll see here in a few minutes, that's indicative of that full year cycle. So for this fiscal year, since it's a half year, the figures are essentially almost in half of that. So what we'll be managing are part of our Affordable Housing Financing Fund, 3 different programs: the land banking, equity, and debt financing. I'm going to primarily speak about the land banking component today. That is the component that we are planning to roll out first. And that's the program that my team is responsible for. I'll touch on the equity and debt financing at a very high level. My colleague at CHAFA, Terry Bernard, his team is responsible for those 2 programs and would be able to answer any questions. And again, those will be rolling out later in the year, but our focus right now is on the land banking piece. So let me get into that. So we are expecting, again, on a full year, anywhere from $27 to $46 million. This ranges between 15% to 25% of the fund. The 15 to 25%, I believe, was in the measure specifically about that. So for this year, again, we'll probably be doing half of that amount. So what is the program? What does it entail? So it's intended to provide grants to local governments and loans to nonprofits to acquire and preserve land for the development of affordable housing. So what's eligible? The measure says predominant use has to be affordable housing. So what does predominant? That's kind of the first hurdle that we've encountered. Right now, and we are interpreting that along with OEdit, that we'll probably settle around 70%. So 70% of the use of the land or of the units, the improvements, so to speak, have to be used for affordable housing, allowing for 30% commercial or mixed use, or if you want to develop market rate units at that site. We are looking at making exceptions between 51 to 69%, and we would expect that the applicants will have to justify their need to go below that 70% affordability requirement. We've received this feedback from some of the resort communities who were looking at lower levels just due to the nature of having kind of some mixed use with ground floor commercial retail and hoping to develop affordable units above that. So that's the reason why we're allowing for some exceptions, or we would ask applicants to ask for a waiver. If all goes as planned, applicants would never have to make a payment on this. Again, because of the whole Tabor issue and municipalities not being able to acquire debt without getting voter approval, the program is designed to provide grants to local governments, which would include public housing authorities, and then nonprofit organizations that have a track record of developing affordable housing. They would be eligible as well to apply for forgivable loans. Now, there are milestones that have to be achieved, and they're set up in 5 and 10 year windows. So within the first 5 years, the project has to be properly zoned, and then a development plan has to be in place. So you have 5 years from the time of funding to do that. And then you have another 5 years to have that project permitted and then funded with your construction or perm financing put into place by the end of that 10 years. So pretty easy. You basically have 10 years to start construction there. So, and you get everything forgiven. And then if the milestones are not achieved, then if you have that forgivable loan, that has to be repaid. And you have 6 months to do that. And then at that point, it would be, you'd repay the amount of the loan plus accrued interest. The accrued interest will most likely be pretty nominal, somewhere in the 2 to 3% range. So nothing that significant. You would have the option to convey or transfer the land to a state agency with that intends to develop it for affordable housing, and that would be in lieu of having to repay those proceeds. There are some AMI requirements, as you obviously would be aware. So rental units would be restricted at 60% AMI or below. You can do AMI averaging. However, that the units that are above 60% would be included in that portion of that 70% that's that allowable mixed or commercial use. So essentially everything in your 70% bucket has to be at 60% AMI or less. If you're doing home ownership units, those would all be restricted to 100% AMI or below. And this would all be kind of set by the baselines by HUD that we're all familiar with. In the measure, there are a couple of key 3 priorities that are called out: high density housing, mixed income, and then environmental sustainability. What we are asking is that applicants in their application narrative, that they address to us, to CHFA, how they plan to address those and meet those needs, rather than us dictating specific requirements out. We recognize that high density housing in Denver is going to look vastly different than it will, could on the Eastern Plains or the Western Slope or somewhere else. So that's we want to allow for some flexibility, but we're kind of putting the onus on the applicant to tell us what they would like to see. Same with mixed income housing as well. Again, everything has to be below 60% AMI. as we're reviewing the applications, and I'll talk about the LOI process here in a moment, if we have two applications that are essentially the same, but one is focused at 100% at 60% AMI, and then one has, you know, a little bit more deeper AMI requirements. You know, we have some units at 30% AMI. We may be strongly encouraged to look at that project that has the 30% AMI component in there. So this again just covers mostly what I had just discussed about the program requirements. The last bullet point there, pre-existing improvements cannot be financed, just the land. So there are situations where you could acquire a piece of land that doesn't have existing improvements on it. However, we would not finance the improvements, just the land portion. So we will still ask for an appraisal on all of these projects. And so the land portion would be eligible. The project itself, though, those improvements would still have to meet the those milestone and AMI requirements by the 5 and 10 year windows. So let's talk about kind of the terms and what we're looking at. We would be looking at $5 million maximum loan or grant amounts. Again, the forgivable loans will have all interest deferred and effectively no payments would be made. I think what we're looking at right now is within 6 months of the first 5-year milestone, we would probably start reaching out to the borrowers or grant recipients and asking for proof that they have the project is zoned and have that development plan in place. So if those milestones are met, it would effectively renew for another 5-year period. During the process of this, we would have a deed of trust or a grant agreement, some sort of security interest that would be filed on the property. We expect that there will be an affordability covenant that's kind of in place for that 10-year period until those milestones are met. And then at which point we are looking at having a minimum of a 40-year affordability requirement placed on the land. You would have the option to reduce that to 20 years, again, through a waiver. And we would expect that there would be a certain market study or justification or need for that in order for that to occur.
And Steve, before you jump to the next program, can I just ask, what's the application process look like? So CHAFA typically just does open application, but just because of the limited nature of these funds, is it going to look more competitive, or is it just, again, open application?
Yep, great question. So we are intending, and if you go to that link that I put in the chat, there will be a link to sign up for some additional webinars. We have a webinar that's scheduled to roll out on July 5th. And that'll explain a lot of this more in detail, but we will have a competitive process. We are anticipating that we will start accepting LOIs, and you will have to go to the CHAFA website or the Prop 123 website in order to access that LOI. It'll be pretty standard form you'll have to complete. So around the middle of July, around July 18th is what we're kind of targeting right now. We'll open that LOI process up. Those will be accepted through about the mid-August, about August 21st right now. And based on the number of LOIs that we receive, that will determine whether or not we need to do a competitive, go through a competitive process. So we're just not sure, based on the number of local governments that are going to sign up and overall demand. So if we only get a handful of applications, most likely we won't do a competitive process. So at that point, so around August 21st, we will make that, we'll cut off the LOI period at that point. Early September, right after Labor Day, we will then probably announce whether or not we're going to need that process. At that point, we will open it up for applications. And again, you'll have to go to the website to download our application. There will be some documentation that you'll have to provide, but nothing too onerous. Nothing that you wouldn't expect to normally see. So we expect that application window will remain open till about, so probably post Labor Day till about mid-November. And then hopefully sometime before the holiday, and again, depending on the number of applications, we're hopeful that by the end of the year, we'll be able to announce the awards. That could creep into Q1 of next year, depending on the number of applications we receive. So I hope that answers that question.
Yep, thank you.
Okay, and I haven't seen any other questions so far in the chat. So that covers land banking. And again, I'm going to go breeze through the next two components here of the equity program. So we are expecting, again, this is a full year, $74 to $130 million. And what this would provide is equity in the form of, and now I can't see my notes. So give me 1 second. Provide for equity investments in low and middle income multifamily rental units for the purpose of creating new units or preserving existing housing. We would expect that the equity financing would be provided in the form of either a non-amortizing or unsecured loan or an actual equity investment in the property. This would allow to be served up to 90% AMI. In addition to that, the measure calls for a tenant equity vehicle to be put into place, which would help support a down payment assistance program for tenants who reside in that project for at least 1 year. So that's pretty much all that I have to share on the equity portion right now. Again, that's being developed by a colleague of mine, and we plan to roll that out after the land banking program.
So do you think that would be before the end of the year, or are we looking at Q1 of next year?
I would say it's going to be late Q4, early Q1. The
Great.
tenant equity vehicle piece is a piece that is entirely new to CHFA, and so we're working on developing that program. So that's going to take a little bit longer than we felt like the land banking program was the easiest and quickest to roll out. So that's why we focused that program first. And then let's see, trying to move my, there we go. So let's talk about concessionary debt. Again, I'll do this at a high level. This would provide $27 to $65 million, and it would be, kind of actual hard debt for-profit and nonprofit entities for the creation and preservation of affordable housing. And there's also a caveat in Prop 123. There's basically one line that alludes to this, which would include funds for factory built for modular and factory built housing. So that's a separate component of that. We have another program as far as the modular piece is concerned with the IHIP program, which is the Innovative Housing Incentive Program. So it'll tie very similar to that. But the intent for both of those programs is really for financing for modular factories. Prop 123 will most likely be utilized for the same purpose and allow for some additional funds to potentially create incentives for traditional or stick-built developers to utilize a Colorado-based modular factory. So there will be much more to come for that. But as far as the concessionary debt outside of the modular piece is concerned, I think the AMI is being targeted on that. 60% average AMI for all units. These would be more or less kind of traditional loans, but they would be have below market rates and allow for subordinate financing as well. So that should be all that I have to share on those programs at this moment. So happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Great. Thanks, Steve. Well, again, I invite anybody that's on the call to feel free to raise your hand if you have any questions from either Steve, Kristen, or Connor. I see that Sue, you had a question and Connor responded, and don't know if there's any follow-up or people have any clarification on what that exchange is all about. But
I don't have any follow-up, but I do have another question. So,
please.
Steve, on the land banking, you're not willing to loan on any improvements. So I wonder if you are thinking about any kind of maybe a sister program that could help with that, because, for instance, I have an option to buy something for our existing land bank program, but it has a house on it, and that's a lot of the value. So if I only could get, 25% or 20% of the cost of the deal from this, it probably isn't a good fit. So I'm just wondering if you're thinking about that, because a lot of infill and really appropriate parcels for land banking will have improvements.
Yeah, so unfortunately, I would say kind of the answer is a little bit of yes and no. Like we are kind of restricted what the measure is for. So it's a land banking program. So it's intended to finance the land. Are there CHFA, depending on the type of the type of the improvement that's being that you're seeking to acquire, there could be the possibility that CHFA, depending on the nature of it, could finance that outside, using one of our more traditional programs, but that could be a possibility.
Yeah, so I guess the issue there, though, is that you would have some level of debt service while you're banking on that land. So that does present something of a disincentive, but
yeah, I mean, again, depending on how it's the type of property, I mean, there might be something that we could do. Again, these are, since they're not CHFA, since the land bank, we traditionally, CHFA has not been a traditional land banking lender. And we traditionally, though, have been a lender on the construction, during the construction phase for multi-family units. So there's maybe that component of some renovation needs to be done.
is there, we have time for one more quick question. If anybody has a follow-up to that exchange or something else. I'm not seeing anything. So again, thank you to Steve and Kristen and Connor. Thank you for jumping in to help out. Appreciate your time. And just everyone know that we will have these slides available on our website, the NoCo Housing Now website. And a link to that will be sent out to everybody that registered for this event. You'll get that next week. And it'll have a link to these materials. And again, it also have the contact information for Chris and Steve. And then again, if you ever want to get a hold of us, there's the link at the very bottom of your screen now with the NoCo Housing Now. You can go to that website and contact us or contact me directly. Just want to also put out I guess a promo for August 25th. Will be our next NoCo Housing Now event. It'll actually be in person. So we're going to be in person at the, soon to be Blue Event Center, now known as Budweiser Event Center. It'll still be Budweiser in August. So you'll be able to find it. But we will have an extended session on the 25th, and we'll again have additional speakers that we're lining up for that event. So keep that on your calendar. And once again, I just want to thank our speakers today, as well as our sponsors, Kaiser Permanente, Brownstein, Ent Credit Union, New Colony Apartments, UC Health, Somerset Apartments, and Northern Engineering. So with that, I'm gonna we'll draw this to a close. And again, thank you for attending today, and look forward to seeing you in August.